I want to begin by speaking directly to the feeling that is perhaps the most silent and at the same time, the most devastating of all. It is the feeling of existential sleepwalking. It is the feeling of living a life that seems correct on paper, that follows all the rules, but that inside sounds hollow, empty, devoid of color. It is the feeling of being an actor in your own life, reciting lines you did not write, following a script you did not choose, and moving towards an ending you do not want. What if this feeling is not a sign that you are failing, but that a part of you is finally beginning to wake up? Carl Jung's profound philosophy offers us a powerful and transformative idea. The life many of us live before we find ourselves is not real life. It is a preface, a dress rehearsal. Real life, with its vibrant colors, its deep meaning, and its resonant magic, only begins at the very moment when the journey inward, the journey to find yourself, begin. In our culture, the phrase finding yourself has become a cliché, often associated with a journey or a superficial change. But in Jung's philosophy, finding yourself is the most significant event in human existence. It is not an act of passive discovery, but an active and sacred process that he called individuation. It is the journey of separating yourself from the expectations of society, your parents, and your culture, and finally becoming the unique, complete, and authentic individual that you, at your core, were always meant to be. Think of yourself this. Most of us live in a small, rented room within the vast and magnificent mansion of our own soul. We decorate this room, we keep it clean, and we believe that this small space is all there is. Finding yourself is the moment when, by some act of grace or desperation, you find the key to the door that separates your room from the rest of the house. And as you open it, you begin to explore, for the first time, the vastness, the beauty, the library, the ballroom, and even the dark and dusty basements of your own totality. It is at this moment that your true life begins. This video is intended to be the map to the first rooms of this mansion. We will map the 5 transformative stages of this awakening process, from the diagnosis of the temporary life you may be living, to the glorious and inevitable consequences of living a life aligned with your true self. The first step in finding yourself is to honestly diagnose the life that is not yours. It is to acknowledge the pain of feeling like an imposter. It's the deep exhaustion that comes from spending your days and years wearing social masks in order to be loved, to be accepted, to be considered successful. It's the constant, silent fear that if that mask slips, if people discover who you really are beneath it, there will be nothing there to love, and that the world you've built on this fragile foundation will crumble. In Jung's language, what we're describing is the reign of the persona and the collective consciousness. To survive in society, we all need to develop a persona, a functional mask that allows us to interact with the world. The problem isn't having a mask. The problem is when we forget we're wearing one. The provisional life is a life dictated entirely by the script of the collective consciousness, the script that tells you to study this, work at that, get married by this age, have certain kinds of ambition. And this life is played out, day in and day out, by your persona, while your true self watches from a distant window. And here's the revelation that can turn your guilt into hope. This feeling of emptiness, of meaninglessness, of anguish that you feel is not a sign that you are broken or that there is something wrong with you. On the contrary, it is a sign that your soul is perfectly healthy. It is yourself, your authentic center, suffocating under the weight of the persona and screaming through its pain that this false life is no longer sustainable. Your suffering is not your enemy. It is your most loyal compass, desperately pointing you in the direction of your home, your true inner home. To begin identifying your masks, we invite you to take a persona inventory. Take a notebook and list the 3 main social roles you play in your life. You could be the perfect son, the successful professional, the always available friend, the self-sacrificing mother. Now, next to each of these roles, write down the answer to a very honest question. To play this role impeccably, what feeling, desire, or truth about myself do I constantly have to repress? Think of yourself as a brilliant actor who was given a role to play when you were very young, and you played it so masterfully for so long that you ended up forgetting your own name. You answer to the character's name, you go home wearing the character's clothes, you speak with the character's accent, and in the silence of the night, you feel a deep and inexplicable emptiness because the real you The actor behind the mask has been left in the dressing room, dusty and forgotten, waiting for years on end for your return. If life in the persona is asleep, something needs to wake us up, and the soul's wake-up call is rarely gentle. It is the pain of rupture. It is the experience of a devastating event that seems to come out of nowhere to shatter your world and your identity. It could be the loss of a job that defined who you were, the end of a relationship in which you lost yourself, the diagnosis of an illness that forces you to re-evaluate everything, or a deep depression that drags you into the shadows. It is the moment when the ground disappears from under your feet. What you may have experienced as your greatest tragedy, depth psychology, inspired by Jung and popularized by mythologist Joseph Campbell, would call your call to adventure. In the hero's journey, the call that takes the protagonist out of his ordinary world and launches him on a journey of transformation is rarely a polite invitation. It is a crisis. It is an event that shatters the temporary life and forces the hero or heroine to step out of their comfort zone and confront the unknown. And here is the break in expectation that can begin to heal your past wound. Your breakdown was not a collapse. It was a breakthrough. It was an emergency intervention, orchestrated by your own self to rescue you from a life of inauthenticity that was slowly killing your soul. Your crisis was not a punishment from the universe. It was an act of grace. It was the divine sledgehammer that broke the wall of your prison so that you could, for the first time, see that there was a whole world on the other side. To begin to reframe your story, we invite you to do a hidden gift analysis. Think about the most significant crisis you have ever faced, and instead of focusing only on the pain and loss, ask yourself with the curiosity of an alchemist, what illusion about myself or the world did this crisis force me to destroy? And the second question, what strength, resilience, or courage that I didn't know I had did this crisis force me to discover within myself? Think of yourself as a seed with a hard, protective shell that is your persona, your ancient identity. In order for a seed to germinate and become the magnificent tree it was born to be, its shell must first be broken. Your crisis was the breaking of the shell. Was it a painful process? Yes. Violent? Perhaps. But it was absolutely necessary so that your true essence, your vital core, could finally find a crack through which to begin to grow towards the light. After the crisis tears the veil of our superficial life, we are faced with a new choice, and with it, a new anguish. It is the fear of looking within. It is the hesitation to begin therapy, to delve deeper into self-knowledge due to a deep and often unconfessed fear of what we may find in the depths of our own soul. It is the fear of discovering that we are not as good or as pure as our mask would have us believe. And this is where the journey to find what truly begins. Jung taught us that this process is not a treasure hunt in search of more good and enlightened qualities. It is, above all, a journey of courage into the dark basement of our unconscious, to find, to talk to, and finally, to make peace with our shadow. The shadow is our other self, the place where we exile all the parts of ourselves that we have repressed because they are considered bad, unacceptable, or unworthy by our family and our society. And the revelation that gives us the courage to make this descent is this: your greatest power, your rawest passion, your wildest creativity, and your purest vitality are not in your conscious light. They are imprisoned in your shadow. By integrating your repressed anger, you do not become an angry person. You access your assertiveness and your ability to say no. By integrating your envy, you do not become an envious person. You discover your true, healthy ambition. You do not become a bad person by embracing your shadow. You become a whole person. And wholeness, not perfection, is the true goal of the soul. To begin to identify your own shadow, a key question Jung left us with is this: what is the characteristic in other people that most irritates, most bothers me, and causes me an almost irrational repulsion? He argued that this intense emotional reaction is often the perfect mirror of a part of our own shadow that we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. The log in someone else's eye is often the speck in our own. Magnify. Think of your true self, your most authentic essence, as the princess locked up high in the tower, and your shadow is the fierce dragon guarding the entrance. The temporary life you were living was an attempt to ignore that the tower even existed. Your true life, your great adventure, begins the moment you stop running from the dragon and instead approach it with respect and courage to ask what it is that it is guarding so zealously. And what the heroes of all mythology discover is that, once understood and respected, the dragon often becomes your greatest and most powerful ally on the journey. After the courageous journey through the darkness, a new uncertainty may arise. It is the question of what authenticity actually feels like. Many of us expect a state of constant happiness, euphoria, and permanent enlightenment. And when the hard days, sadness, or anger still come, we become frustrated, believing that we have failed in our process or that we have not yet found ourselves. What happens as the inner journey of shadow integration progresses is that our ego, the manager of our conscious, ceases to be the tyrannical master of our psyche and assumes its rightful place as the loyal servant and conscious partner of ourself. A direct and stable line of communication, what Jung called the ego-self axis, is finally established, and your life is guided no longer by the fears and desires of the ego, but by the wisdom and sense of wholeness of the self. And here is the revelation that changes our metric of success. Finding yourself does not feel like constant euphoria. It feels like solidity. It feels like an unshakable calm in the eye of the hurricane. You discover that external circumstance, the storms of life, still happen, but they no longer drag you down. You become less reactive to criticism, but also, interestingly, less dependent on praise. Your intuition stops being a whisper and becomes your main, and you gradually stop asking for opinion and start trusting your own inner knowing, a certainty that needs no explanation or validation. To strengthen this center, the invitation is for an inner authority just for one day. Observe yourself. Notice how often, before making a decision or expressing an opinion, you seek external validation, whether from a partner, a friend, or by researching on the internet. The practice is, for one small decision in your day, make it based solely on what you, in your center, feel is right for you. And then, notice the feeling of self-sovereignty, however small, that this small act generates in your body. Consider that, before, when you lived in the persona, you were like a fragile bush whose thin branches swayed violently with every wind of outside opinion that blew. The process of finding yourself is like finally growing roots, thick, deep roots that hold firmly to the center of the earth. The winds of life, the opinions of others, the criticisms and praises still blow, but now they only shake your leaves, never able to shake the integrity and solidity of your trunk. Once you have found your center, the last fear the mind can conjure is fear of the future. It is the fear that by becoming authentic and following your own compass, you will be lonely, poor, or unsuccessful because you're no longer playing the game of society. It is the belief that authenticity has too high a price to pay in the material world. What happens next is the manifestation of the most beautiful of all laws of the soul, the law of resonance. Your external world is and always will be a mirror of your internal world. As you become more whole, more coherent, and more authentic on the inside, your external reality is forced by a universal law to reorganize itself to reflect this new truth of yours. External chaos gives way to internal order, and it is at this point that your life becomes magical. This is where synchronicity, once a rare occurrence, becomes the default language of your universe. The right people, the right books, the right opportunities begin to appear in your life, not by effort, but by attraction. A sense of purpose emerges not as a career you choose with your mind, but as a natural and inevitable expression of who you have become. And you begin to attract relationships based on resonance with yourself, no longer on the needs of your persona. To actively live in this new reality, the invitation is to practice aligned intention. Set a small goal or intention for your week, a goal that is 100% true to your values and your joy, not what you should do. Then, put your energy into it with a sense of joy and detachment from the outcome, and then just observe. Be aware of the coincidences, the encounters, and the insights that the universe will bring to support your true intention. Think of your life as a radio tuned out of tune, sending and receiving only noise and static. By finding yourself, by doing all this inner work, you have finally tuned your dial to the exact frequency of your soul, and suddenly, the music of the universe, which has always been playing, becomes clear, crisp, and audible, and you realize, with immense joy, that your only task from now on is simply to dance to that tune. Together, we have recapitulated the most important journey a human being can take, the journey from the gray, provisional life of the persona, through the necessary crisis and darkness of the shadow, to the emergence of a solid self and the manifestation of an authentic, colorful, and meaningful life. And the central truth that I hope will resonate in your heart is this: finding yourself is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of real life. It is the turning point where you stop being a reactive passenger carried along by circumstance and become the conscious author and protagonist of your own epic story. For as Jung's philosophy teaches us, the greatest and noblest work a human being can do in this is not to change the world, it is to become himself. And in doing so, you offer the greatest gift possible to the world, a whole, authentic, conscious individual, rather than just another frightened fragment. The life you have lived thus far has been your training. Your pain has been your calling. Your crisis has been your crowning. And now, the real adventure begins. Welcome to the first day of your real life. Your soul has been waiting.